Hello guys. So I just wanted to continue from last week. We talked a lot about reps and I try to bring in some context for you guys around where you're supposed to be. I thought I'd take it a bit further this week. The reason being is because there's a point of work-wise from a max, when we're doing our speed sessions or doing our power sessions or our strength sessions, our max sessions, there's a big fault with a lot of people in the community of training worldwide who, especially gyms, let's be very specific, probably more that way, but people tend to overdo things and they always do their utmost best every single time. So the question comes in, well, is that making you end up going worse? So are you starting to get overtrained and fatigued? Does that mean that people are starting to gain weight, etc., carry more injuries and things like that? And that's generally what starts to go wrong, is that something starts to happen that's not what they want. And then the other flip side with that is that people get negative or depressed or sort of negatively impacted by what they are trying to achieve. What I wanted to do here today is so this is just sort of modifying something from Charles Poliquin, taking from one of his charts. I just added a few things in. Essentially, and I've put a picture into the email as well. On this side here, we've got the neural adaptation. Over here, we've got the energy sort of metabolic adaptation side of things. I've put rest in, some rest brackets, etc. along there. Obviously, as we go up this axis, guys, we're looking at neural adaptation going increase. As we come on this one, we're coming down from the neural more into the metabolic reactions and the energy system side of things, with especially the aerobic system. And the aerobic system certainly is far more energetic in its influence rather than metabolic. So when we start doing things like 30 reps, 50 reps, or 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute, 90-minute type runs, etc., we're starting to move into much more of an aerobic capacity. You guys as clients will have noticed with me that when we do a lot of the endurance sessions, I tend to like what we call the intensive type endurance sessions, which are more less than that 30-minute phase, have moments of rest in them, etc., and there's a ratio balance around that. Essentially what I wanted you guys to understand is that the most important part about this is looking at what I've called the 1RM training max, the competition max. There's something here called a strength deficit, and when we go to limit strength, it's pretty much talking about those moments of when people lift up cars because they've got babies underneath them, or people are in hypnosis and they can do amazing things. That's something generally as a conscious, it's accepted as it's an effort level that as a conscious result does not really happen. So like our strongman competitions, and you hear me rage about Thor, etc. all the time. I'm quite a big admirer. He's pretty much working here when he's doing his big competition lifts. For us, if there's maybe a 1RM testing kind of moment, we would have had those kind of days. I'd be testing you at here. We'd be training off that. So when I say 90%, I'm talking about 90% of that 1RM training thing for you guys specifically. If I was training an athlete, I'd probably run it a little bit differently, and I'd try to get them closer to that competition level and then base their program backwards from percentage loads on what that is. But we're not competing for Olympic lifts, or we're not competing for power lifts. There are moments when I ask you guys to be strong, but there are moments when I ask you to work in that sort of 50 to 70%, 80% zone and work on what we call the speed strength, which is that velocity and that fast dynamic lifting or fast dynamic working. That's very different to that kind of level, and it's very different to what happens down here. When, I've got the bottom down at 0 to 40%, that's kind of core stuff, type 1 muscle fiber, etc. There's a lot of there. You can go with zero rest on that. Coming over here, we're looking at the sort of recovery rates, and if you look at the picture that I put in there, you'll see that pretty much between 0 up to 60% is a very sort of, depending on the level of exercise, your rest is very sort of relative to that, if I can use that word. A cable face pull for 20 reps with a rope, you know, you're going to want a certain level of rest, whether it's 30 seconds or 60 seconds, compared to an alternating Superman lying on the ground on the floor, and you want to roll over and do a reverse crunch or a plank or something like that. Like, you don't really need to rest for something like that, okay? So in saying that, if you're in a rehab model, different scenario, okay? So again, always applying, these are the science models, like this is black and white. But the big thing is to be able to apply it. As trainers and coaches, we're supposed to apply it to the individuals in front of us. What I'm doing with my system with you guys is looking at how to apply that to the individual and thinking laterally as much as I can. What I suppose the big takeaway from today that I'd ask you to get is understanding that when we're up at these higher loads, we're looking at the 1RM training side of things, or percentage of the 1RM. So when I say 80% 1RM, okay, I'm looking at, if it's 100 kilos for your deadlift, it's 80% of that deadlift, okay, which would be 80 kilos, which is different to the 8 out of 10 rate of perceived exertion, okay, and it comes down to more novice lifting versus intermediate type people and what their ability and understanding is of that. At the end of the day, it's a workload. You cannot drop yourself and be under it, because it's ineffective and you're not going to get results. At the same time, you can't go over these things. It's important to be able to understand these scales, because if you understand the scales, you guys are getting more results and you're being more effective. I just write it on the board. You're the people that are lifting and working and exercising and training to get that. The big thing with this that I wanted to really make in is that our training is an accumulation. All right, we don't train at competition level. And that's the big problem I was talking about, where so many people do this. They train at competition levels and they get exhausted. We are training in accumulatory responses to be able to get faster as a sprint, or be able to do a 30-minute run very well without stopping if you decide to train yourself one day outside and go for a run on a weekend, okay? Or you have an accumulatory response at a neural level and you're not over fatigued, and one day when you lift, if you've been doing 100 kilo deadlifts in the past as a test method, and you decide to go lift again and you knock out 120, you know you haven't overtrained. You know you've done really well with what we're trying to be getting to, and you're sort of working at the values that we're asking for. Guys, there's going to be questions. Please do ask. Please don't wing through this. It's important that you understand it. And the more you understand it, the more accurate you'll be with this. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.